Thank you very much indeed. It's great to be here. We've got a big subject and a little time to get through it. So for detailed bios, I'd ask you to consult the packs you've been given, but just very briefly, we're very fortunate to have a very eclectic and high-powered panel with me. We've got Changhua who is a Chinese clean energy and climate policy expert. From Morocco, we've got Dr. Leila Benali, the Minister of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development. And from industry group, the Oil and Gas Initiative, we've got Julien Perez, who's their VP of Strategy and Policy. So without further ado, I better get cracking. Changhua, China's like front and center of all debates to do with both the transition, climate politics. It's the top emitter and the top producer of climate solutions. I was wondering if you could get a feel of just where you see China's role in the climate, in the energy transition evolving, and what are the key points you think that maybe are underappreciated?
Sure. Thank you, Rafiq, for that question, and also thank you for Energy Intelligence for the kind invitation. I feel like, I might be the only one from China on the speakers, and so it's not like China likes to be the center of the world, but somehow, like it or not, that's a reality. Let me start by emphasizing a few points. The first point I want to emphasize, which is the foundation of the debate today, probably, climate politics is destructive, and climate divide is bad. If you somehow maybe ask ChatGPT today, and if you ask the right question, I think even AI could tell the world is not necessarily so serious about the climate change challenges there. We made all the commitments, but in reality, just look at the conversation, the debate around, in the mainstream media today, it's not really hopeful. If you ask a 5-year-old, they probably would tell as well. They're not really serious about their parents, grandparents, about addressing climate change issues there. China, on the other side, provides a rather consistent message, particularly getting into the 2020s. There are a few highlights to answer your question, Rafiq. The first one, actually, is the national strategy shift. Something I call like a 1+N. If you read China, policy direction there, and 1 is decarbonization, and N is a 75 national planning for the 14th five-year plan, which we're in the middle right now, between 2021 and 2025. When the whole country decided to use decarbonization as the lead thread to unite the systemic transformation there. So it's not an easy journey, but we set all the targets we could at this moment, including modern energy system there, renewable energy, industrial policy, whatever you name it. If you are interested, you should read some sort of reports there as well. So through that national strategic focus, China has a clearly set pathway moving towards this transition, addressing climate change challenges, of course. The second one is Belt and Road Initiative. Why we're sitting here today in Beijing, yesterday and today, which is the 3rd summit of a Belt and Road Initiative. A lot of leaders gathered there as well, including public and private sectors there. A key message is green. It didn't really start today. It started 2021 when Chinese national government, political leaders committed to stop any investment in coal-fired power plants capacity in other developing countries there. It stopped together. If you look at the current portfolio of investment from China, through the Belt and Road Initiative, at least this year so far, 40% is about renewable energy there in other developing countries there. China, of course, itself has achieved tremendously clean energy transition, but now we are investing in other countries there. The third one opportunity is a green supply chain transformation. It's really using the China's strength in the industrial value chain to transform, because the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, and the infrastructure foundation is already there for China to really drive the green agenda. And the final point I want to emphasize is really ESG, accountability. Like it or not, I don't know whether you understand it or not, China is literally using accountability, ESG, as the opportunity to enhance, of course, the transformation in the meantime, accountability. somehow, hopefully through that process, that's going to help a little bit to address the geopolitical conflicts there so that China will be better positioned to work with the global community to drive global clean energy transition and fighting climate change. So that's sort of 4 highlights, probably not fully understood by the international community, that I would like to bring here to this stage today to make sure that you really need to understand, rather than being stuck in the geopolitical sort of, controversial rivalry there, you need to look at the reality, recognizing China's role and the contribution to the global clean energy transition.
Thanks, Changhua. We'll dive a bit deeper into a couple of those subjects. But first, Minister, pleasure to have you here. You've been on the coalface of these climate discussions for quite some time. Tell me what you, Morocco, want to see happen from the developed countries at COP28. What do you think they need to do more of?
Well, thanks, Rafiq, for this opportunity to provide the views not only of Morocco, but of several countries like Morocco who are at the forefront of climate, having been affected disproportionately by the climate issue, but also by the intricacies of the different crises that we are facing in the 21st century, I think starting with the fall of the Berlin Wall. And so the fact that I think the first thing that the world is asking for, and especially, yes, a group from the Global South is asking for, is definitely a better awareness and quicker transformation to these new structural issues like a stickier inflation, a lower growth. And I'm coming actually from Marrakesh, where we had the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank. And you cannot de-link the energy discussions that we are having here, the climate discussions that we will be having at a COP, and the fact that the financial world is not ready yet to tackle the fact that we will have stickier inflation and lower growth. So I think the first thing that the Global South is asking is to depart from this decade-old mentality of bond versus equity, of short-term, very short-termism view when it comes to investment. And I think what Catherine McGregor was telling you this morning was very simple. Yes, we need to move together to a very integrated energy system. If I take just the energy system as an example, accepting the fact that gas is a transition fuel, that we will need to counteract the years of underinvestment in traditional energy, and I think Amin Nasser was exactly saying something like that. But the whole point of these two CEOs of large energy companies is to say these crises that we are facing are inflationary by nature. So as long as we don't try to push for deflationary solutions, energy efficiency to reduce your bills, economies of scale when it comes to renewables, and later on green hydrogen and green ammonia, we will not be able to tackle these triple planetary crises, being climate, biodiversity loss, and pollution. So I think that's point number one, is to ensure that we quickly transform not only the way we finance projects, not only the way we finance countries and the energy sector, but also the way well, Catherine was talking about being convinced. I'm getting a bit one step further. Starting today, show us that you are having this new mentality. Second thing that the Global South is asking, and I'll stop there, is increasing the awareness that this is a cross-border, cross-generational issue that we are facing. And what does that mean in concrete, again, investment financing terms? Cross-border, it means that those subsidies, incentives, taxes have to be cross-border as well. If I take the example of the Inflation Reduction Act, or when China invested massively in solar panels and enabled a very needed decrease in costs for solar energy, this has to be transpiring to the rest of the globe. And of course, cross-generational, what does it mean? It means that we need to have more flexibility in long-term financing. When it comes to country financing, some flexibility in long-term bonds, if we want green bonds. So these are, I would say, just in a nutshell, two main messages. There are more than that, of course.
Great taster. Julien, you're probably aware that there's been some criticism of the industry. Do you think it's valid? And what sort of role, specifics, do you think the industry can play and do better?
Yeah, I mean, you've all seen what's happening in the street of today, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, of course, there is a lot of criticism going to the industry, and I think there's a couple of components behind it. So first of all, what OGCI is doing, like what we are doing. So the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative is here to be a catalyst for change. So we do engage the industry, and we understand what are the complexity that they are facing, because the energy landscape is changing very fast. There's multiple regions with different type of energy mix that's going to happen. I mean, Leila just highlighted a number of points that are very valid in terms of how the global south and the global north are moving at different pace and scale in terms of their energy transition. And so it's the oil and gas industry has, at least from our point of view, has a critical role to play here because of its capacity to balance between molecules and electrons and having different type of specificity in different markets. So I think what OGCI aims to do, first of all, is, again, to be this catalyst for change. So addressing the short-term emissions that need to be addressed, i.e., like the direct emission from the operation, which is quite a significant number. We are talking about twice the airline emissions, for instance, if you take just the...
Sorry, how much?
Twice the airline industry, just the direct emission from the oil and gas industry. So the scope 1 and 2 is 2 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, 2 times the airline industry. So addressing those, and obviously the methane emission being one of the critical ones. And historically, what we have done is now becoming the standard within the industry, and we want to continue. We need to do more. It's clearly not enough, and we need to accelerate. Where the industry as well could expand massively its role is more on the distribution of low-carbon solution. So, hydrogen, the CCUS, renewable energy, biofuels, all of this type of activity where, when you think about it, the oil and gas industry brings like the combination of skill sets, the balance sheet, the international presence that is necessary, and also embarking the national companies from the developing part of the world. Because generally speaking, when people think about the oil and gas industry, you have the big major in mind, but we all forget about a number of producing nations that are as well have their own national companies, and it's so important to bring them along as well. So I think the criticism on the industry are also to some extent fair, because we need to do more, and definitely need to do more. And I think we need to talk about it in a much clearer manner. If I tend to summarize, it's an industry that is by nature a little bit conservative, because it's full of engineers, and engineers like to know where they want to go and how they're going to make it before saying anything. And I think this is interpreted in a way that we don't do enough, or we try to slow down things, which is not true at all. Definitely not true what we see.
If you take something like methane, I mean, those emissions keep on going up. I mean, surely this is an area where the industry has got to hold its hands up and say it's not done well enough.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take the methane challenge, so on methane, on the scope 1 and 2, sorry, I said 2 gigatons. Actually, it's methane emission with 2 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. The total scope 1 and 2 of the oil and gas industry is 5 gigatons. But if you just take the methane emission, you're right, the emissions have been increasing. So it's probably a combination of better measurement, because now we are deploying technology to measure methane emission, as well as potentially, declining practices. What we see as well is that the intensity of methane emission is declining, though. So that means that there is an improvement in some operational practices within the industry. And this is why as well, like, we launched a couple of years back what is called the Aiming for Zero Methane Emission Initiative. Yep. And the idea is to switch the mindset of the industry and look at methane emission the same way as the industry has been looking for fatalities or oil spills, so zero tolerance approach. And we know that when this mindset change happens in the industry, then it cascades a number of procedures, capex allocation, and best practices that could be deployed across different assets.
Thank you. Changhua.
Yes.
I'd like to tie in a couple of things you said with something Leila said about the importance of pursuing deflationary solutions. Now, I note with what you said about the supply chain, we're seeing a lot more rivalry over global supply chains, which would strike me as we're going exactly in the opposite direction. We're heading as a planet towards more inflationary transition. Do you see that? Do you agree with that? Where's the solution? And what sort of benefits do you see from the Chinese approach?
I definitely agree. I think that's the reality world we have to deal with. But in the meantime, I wish the world is just black or white, right? If this is bad, we do whatever the other one. It's not. It's really mixed. Sitting through, actually, I listened to a little bit of opening remarks as well as sitting on this panel. I really feel, I think rather than being stuck in the sort of micro sort of economic sort of level, we do need to put things in perspective. I just see huge gap, mismatch in terms of the conversations in different rooms there. 2 weeks ago, I was in Tokyo. I was sitting on the steering committee of this ISEF 10th annual meeting. It's about innovation for Cool Earth Forum. So it's about innovation, right? And so we have scientists like the former IPCC chairman, Professor Li in the room on the steering panel. We have a lot of innovators, professors actually, old, young actually in the room. The dynamic of the room is pretty much about, say, we have this climate crisis. Scientists are telling us if we take whatever the scientists are telling us, somehow we need to reimagine a different future, right? Somehow, so far at this moment, I do know by being here on the panel, that already tells a huge difference in terms of mindset of this platform here. But somehow the conversation I heard so far, I feel like we're still the industrial mindset here, which is not really sort of aligned with whatever we're talking about here beyond this room there. Now, back to your question. I really want to emphasize the role of China in the global, we call it clean energy manufacturing supply chain there, right? I know the conversation is that security risk. So whatever China does is cornered using this security threat, right? You just cannot get out of that space, really looking at in a broader perspective, what we're dealing with here today. If there was not such a climate crisis, why are we talking about all these issues here today? Like it or not, China is already contributing about 70, 80, whatever, all this percentage actually in terms of clean energy technology manufacturing capability there, right? As Minister Leila mentioned already, China's contribution by contributing actually to the industrialization of these technologies has dramatically lowered the cost there. So now you have the affordability element you could talk about it there. Then why not deploy them? Take advantage of that capability and potential capacity already, right? And really deploy. Rather, the new dynamic created by the West versus China is that, oh, China is a threat. We had to mine more resources, critical metals around the world. We had to build new industrial value chains because we need to compete with China. We cannot rely on China that much. That sort of a narrative is really complicating the situation we're talking about here today, right? And if we take whatever the Paris Agreement seriously, say by 2030, we need to reduce emission at least 43%, ideally half the percent, by half of the, the current emission, by 2050 get to net zero. Imagining without China's industrial capability actually already on the ground today, can we deliver that? If we cannot really answer that question, I don't think we are all serious about it. Can the world afford waiting for the US, for other countries to build up your own industrial value chain? Then we deliver whatever the goals. The world will be too warmed up. I don't think we're going to address that. So I would like to shift a little bit, actually, the narrative, rather than say, okay, this is a macroeconomic situation, supply, demand, whatever, stuff like that. We need to open up the horizon of the discussion. Otherwise, I do not see the solution there.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, there's no very interesting stuff. There's no doubt that conflict and disagreement is intensifying. What happens, Minister, if we do not get agreement at COP28? Where do we go? And what are the likelihoods of it?
And what?
What are the likelihoods of not reaching agreement?
Well, I think, all in all, regardless of what happens at COP, I generally think that we will have a very pragmatic COP that will lead, I think, a breakthrough on one thing that is very important, which is finance. I would not want to get too much into the issue of carbon pricing and put in a price on carbon, because I generally think that this is one key area where the energy industry, and we have a lot of representatives in this room, can contribute actually to the world by putting and helping put a price on carbon. But I would want to segue to another topic that is very important for us. The IEA has issued a report yesterday or this morning, getting into exactly what I struggle with every day as a policymaker, which is how to ensure that we invest in the grids. The IEA has said that we need to build or change 80 million kilometers of grids between now and 2040, which is the equivalent of what we have built over the last 100 years. I still haven't looked at the report, so I still want to see what they put on Africa and a few other countries and regions where there is a tremendous problem of access, of energy access, and where we are all pushing all together, including a COP, to ensure that, at least for those countries that were, and continents that were left behind, they have their actually share of future investments. When it comes to Morocco, I'll give you the example of Morocco. I have, today, starting in 2023, to ensure that the private sector, a large share of the private sector, national and international, with of course some public funding, invests 5 times more annually that we have been investing over the last 15 years in the energy system. And a large part of it, 50% of that, goes directly into transmission and distribution. That's why I was insisting on the long-term financing issues, because unless you do that with some trust and some benefit of the doubt that, for example, the country that you are lending to is not going to disappear over the next 50 years. We have 25% of UN memberships that are going to disappear over the next, between now and 2100. You will not be able to finance transmission and distribution. That's as simple as that. It's stable return, but it requires long-term financing. That's one example of where I think, in addition to the loss and damage operationalization, because we, again, we don't need to wait another 30 years. We just don't have 30 years to wait for making that loss and damage funding operational. So these are a few examples where Morocco is putting itself as an open lab, where you have large investments, of course, in your traditional large renewable projects, and we know how to finance those, the 400, 500 megawatts projects. That's the first business model. Second business model is finishing our rural electrification program. We reached 99.9% electrification in Morocco. But the most difficult is that last mile, that 0.1%. That is very difficult unless you get away from, again, the decade-old mentality of how you finance those projects. We will not be able to achieve that, and we want to achieve that. We want to finish at 0.1% of electrification with different business models, having some solar and batteries, and the financing package that goes with this so we can replicate it. And the third business model that is very important for us is to decarbonize the industry and the hard-to-abate sectors. And these are, because there I'm trying to solve the feedback loop that we have been struggling with in this sector, is you cannot invest in part of the value chain, including renewable energy, if you don't have the industrial anchor, the off-taker. And the off-taker will not come if you don't have access to low-cost, low-carbon energy. And so you have that feedback loop that we are trying to break in our third business model, our third cluster of industrialization. That means we need to inject, just in Morocco, $1 billion per year in the energy transition sector.
And you're relatively hopeful, confident that you're going to get some form of breakthrough or progress on these financing issues in Dubai?
We're having a pre-COP meeting end of October, and I think there are some signals that will be sent after that pre-COP meeting on the 31st of October, indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Great, interesting stuff.
Can I just add a couple of points, actually? One, the IEA report, actually, the grid, I also came across that as well. There's one sentence in terms of investing in grid, except China. So China has been investing dramatically in the grid capacity because the growth of renewable energy, exponential growth of renewable energy need to get connected to the grids. And so far, the country has been leading, if you look at high voltage, ultra high voltage grid capability there, so that's more centralized capability. But in the meantime, really going towards distributed sort of grid there as well.
Have you got any numbers attached to the renewables?
Number in terms of
generation, renewable generation?
Renewable energy. So, okay, just put things in perspective. The Chinese official commitment actually to the Paris Agreement is that by 2030, the combined solar and the wind energy installations should get to no less than 1,200 gigawatts. Today, where China is standing by the end of this year, China is already getting closer to 1,100 gigawatts. So the target set for 2030 will be definitely achieved way ahead of time, no later than 2025. So that puts a bigger picture in terms of China's commitment of peaking emissions. I think that's one of the issues actually global community cares about, because China is the largest emitter today, and we need to figure out how to cap, turn literally, pivot, basically, reduce the emissions there. So the commitment is that we're going to cap the emissions before 2030. Now, so how before that will be? So the attention of the country is really zoomed into that sort of space. I say, okay, let's get there as soon as possible. Now, with all the indications so far on the positive side, hopefully no later than 2025. So that's not the official announcement, but somehow, hopefully, that's going to be the way we're going to go. But in the meantime, on the sort of distraction part with the geopolitical sort of rivalry there, which is not really helpful, very distractive. So hopefully somehow factors like that won't really distract the country away from the current major path of transition. So keep the fingers crossed there.
Thank you. Good to get some good news for a change. Julien, one thing you mentioned, CCS. And I know the industry has been pushing strongly for it. I know the people outside this door, quite frankly, think it's a scam to lock in demand long term. Sell us on it. Tell us how much you think is needed, and is it going to happen?
So yeah, I think you're right. Like the perception of the CCUS, I think, is a bit overlooked in the market. We know, and I was at the New York Climate Week at Benali discussing about it, and there was like a number of representatives from the cement industry or the steel industry, and we know that from those industries, cement is a core component of their decarbonization strategy. I think if I pick up the word that one of the major cement industry player was saying, is that if you want cement, you're going to get CO2. So if you want cement without CO2, you need CCUS. There's no question about it, because you have process emission coming with it. So if you start from the point where we're going to need to deploy CCUS at some stage for some specific industry, then you look at it from a hub's perspective, because it doesn't make any sense to develop a CCUS project with the transport and the storage and all the studies and the cost that comes along just for one plant. So you start to look at it from a hub perspective. So how many industry players can plug in their CO2 emission into this system to decarbonize, and then you just put the CCUS alongside the marginal abatement cost curve of options that you have. It's not CCUS or renewable, it's a combination of both. Yeah. It's going to enable a number of industry to get to net zero. So what we've seen so far is like an expansion of a number of hubs that are being assessed, and for some of them will run into operation in the next few years. Some of them are being in the scale of multiple million tons, if not the biggest one I have in mind is 40 million tons per year of carbon capture. And so OGCI has been trying to catalyze those hubs, making the assessment of where the hubs that can be decarbonized, expanding the project, investing in some of them. Many of our member companies now are involved in a vast majority of the CCUS across the world. 40 are part of our portfolio. We started with 5 only a few years back. So we see this market being expanded, and of course there are going to be some economics of scale as the technology evolves. So we do see CCUS playing a key role. It's not going to be like the silver bullet. It's going to be in combination of other solutions, but it's going to be quite critical for a number of industry, and so could be used as well as with other industries that are nearby. That's what is happening, for instance, if I give you an example. One project that we've been an early investor in is the project that is on the East Coast cluster of the UK. And we started with a very relatively modest project at the beginning because there was just in the pre-feasibility stage a few industry players interested in. And as the project is maturing, because it takes time to develop a CCUS project, as the CCUS project is maturing, we have a growing interest from a number of emitters that want to get into this project and to plug in their CO2 emissions. So I think we have doubled the size now of the project, and probably by the time it's going to be put into operation, it's probably going to grow slightly more.
Thank you, thank you. Well, about time to go to the floor. If there's any questions from the audience, we're very happy to take them. Yes, here at the front. If you just wait for your mic, and if you could please state your affiliation.
Andrew Gould, the Energy Forum.
Yep.
I have a question for Changhua, which is, China has been a pioneer in developing the use of HVDC transmission. I don't know where you stand now, but a few years ago, can you hear me? High voltage direct current transmission.
Yeah, China is what?
HVDC lines.
Okay, yeah.
You were a leader in implementing this, and in the context of the remodeling of the grid, don't you think this technology has a much bigger role to play than so far has actually been happening? And partly, I know it's partly due to the cost, but the implementation everywhere else seems to be really slow compared to what China did initially.
The simple answer to your question, yes, absolutely. China has already been on that path. I think the case made already within China. If you look at the investment in the hydro, ultra high sort of voltage, grid, and also the connection, enabling the connectivity with the renewable energies, that's pretty much laid the foundation for success for China's acceleration of renewable energy there. In the meantime, China has been making some efforts beyond the country, in some other regions there as well. But so far, they're bumped into different challenges, stuff like that. I think there's a geopolitical element is there as well. You cannot deny that. And then, of course, the financing issue, I don't think that has been addressed yet. So China probably has offered a better scenario context for all the pieces coming together. And of course, the background is that the government, the public financing has been really on that, right? If you look at many other countries in the South, probably they are not in that position to do so. So there are issues like that, barriers like that, that have not been addressed. So you have all those blocks actually for technologies, even though they are proven in China, but somehow still bumping into blocks in terms of scaling.
Thank you.
Want me to add to
Anyone
that?
else?
I mean, well, among the numerous tenders that are going to be issued between now and the end of the year and early next year, we have actually a tender that should be coming out this week as we speak. We are just putting the final touch on a large HVDC line connecting the south of the country to the north of the country, because we have tremendous renewable potential in the south of Morocco with capacity factors exceeding 80% for wind and, of course, solar as well. So yes, I mean, as we speak, we are putting the final touch on a large HVDC tender, plus, of course, the coming tender on gas infrastructure to multiply the entry points of LNG into Morocco. But in addition, of course, to the solar tenders and all the rest.
Hi, Casey Merriman, Energy Intelligence. I had a follow-up question on China and kind of your initial comments on maybe things that we are not appreciating in the West on the story. And just, if you look at the track record on things like solar and EV and just the deployment uptake has kind of exceeded all expectations. And as you say, even on renewable power, the goals are set to far go ahead of plans. Is there another kind of technology that you think is kind of underappreciated or not watched, whether it's on electrolyzers or some other element of kind of clean energy deployment that we should be paying more attention to in terms of China's execution?
From China's side. Yeah, I think the only thing I can think of now is AI, digital technology there, smart technology. If you look at the renewable energy, clean energy transition cannot just go ahead without AI-enabled capability there, and then immediately we bumped into, digital data security issue. That's a reality already. I think it's relatively new at this moment. China is definitely gearing ahead to make the case within the country, and not just for the technology itself. We do need to address the transition issue. We need to address the emissions issues there. Then, of course, the bigger question mark on the table now say, okay, if that case is made again in China, what does that mean to the other countries? Again, this is an emerging new issue, relatively new, and that would require collective political decisions probably. But as we are talking about it here today, if the geopolitical part cannot be addressed properly, I think that probably will bump in. It's another issue right away down the road. Yeah, finger crossed. Again, yeah.
Leila, Julien, do you have anything to add to that? Any low-hanging fruits in terms of technologies?
Well, I think one technology that we've not necessarily discussed at length here is also the potential for hydrogen, which is, of course, quite a fancy word today, but it's a molecule that has been, in the market for decades, just to make it clear. But now what we're observing as well is that you have a new set of customers that coming into play, and so deserving the right form of hydrogen is going to be quite critical, and the right form of low-carbon hydrogen. So you have between the different colors, I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but the carbon intensity of the hydrogen and the potential for hydrogen, particularly to decarbonate the shipping industry, is going to be quite critical. So that's another areas that we're looking at very seriously.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to an all too soon end to our panel. If I had to sum up three very loud and clear messages I'm hearing, is one, pragmatism. We've got a need for every and all of the above in terms of methods and technologies for mitigating emissions. Two, timing. We do not have time. We have to move now. And three, we have to sort out financing and be aware that we're in a new environment as regards inflation and come up with some really creative ways of countering it. I'd like you to join me in thanking our distinguished panel. It's been great to have you here. Thanks a lot.